Welcome back to Tying That Guy. This is producer Joe recording the intro because the guys forgot to. Today we will be discussing John Carpenter Part 3, The Thing, with special guests Breck, Eisner, and Strait. So let's get to it.
One of the things that we talked about a lot in John Carpenter 1 and John Carpenter 2 is how we felt that he operated best as an independent filmmaker where he was in complete control. He was having to improvise in the moment, be creative in the moment. And when he started getting some studio clout, the movie started suffering a little bit. I'm going to revise that a little bit because this was a Universal movie. This was his first big studio movie, and I think this is his best movie. And going back and watching it. And so I think that, you know, it's interesting and something that we can talk about is when he started making some missteps as a filmmaker, because clearly this is a well-crafted, well-orchestrated, well-shot. I mean, around the board, it's such a tight, beautifully filmed movie. Go ahead, Ty.
Oh, I was just going to say, I agree with all of that, but this is also the movie where he got a decent budget. He put his heart and soul into it. He made, as you said, maybe the best film of his career, and it was an abject failure, both financially and critically. And I think that hurt him in a way that he had a hard time recovering from.
What's interesting is because this was 82, and I try to imagine why this was a failure, because it has everything a horror movie, it has everything like a great horror movie has. I mean, what year did The Shining come out?
81.
81? So The Shining was a massive hit, and that was a psychological thriller in this way. But one of the things that, one of the things that about this movie that really pulls me in every time that I can identify from the beginning is that it's a movie about paranoia. And the paranoia is the glue that holds you in. It's the tension within the scenes. And he's a master at every scene, raising the stakes and upping the paranoia. It's very well constructed and very well shot.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously agree 100%. I mean, it is the ultimate paranoia movie because it is the movie about the monster can be anyone in the room and there's no way to know. And so all the little gimmicks that they go through in this movie are to suss out the monster. And some of the best jump scares in the movie are the one where they're testing the blood. Yeah. Who could the monster be? And then you hit the monster's blood and like immediately all hell breaks loose. But the tension in that moment of like, it could be any of us and we're testing one by one.
What's interesting is Carpenter talks about in 82, it was like right at the beginning of the AIDS pandemic. And he says that there's another layer in this movie of what was going on, what was kind of representative of what was happening in the world, because they didn't know yet at that point what was causing AIDS. They knew it had something to do with the blood. They knew that there was something within, that was insidious that lived within this disease, and they were trying to figure out what it is. And, part of the movie was like his expressing that paranoia that they were going through at the time.
I didn't know that angle.
And what's interesting is by the way, bearded Kurt Russell. I mean, he should be bearded more often. R.J. McCready. I think this is, and I think a top. I don't know if Joseph has our top 5, but a fun top 5 would be either top 5 Kurt Russell characters, top 5 Kurt Russell movies, or top 5 Kurt Russell performances. This one is at the top of all of those, except Tombstone.
Wow, that's a bold.
Yeah, Thing is the shit.
Escape from New York is pretty high on that list.
Oh. Escape from New York is number 2 or number 3, but Tombstone is up there in terms of performance and clout of getting the movie made, pretty much directing the movie. The first 2 acts of Tombstone is like, doesn't get better than that cinematic.
Is Tango and Cash number 3, I assume?
I mean, it could be argued. The 2 she's seen in Tango and Cash alone.
Can I ask a very uninformed question? Was the Thing made after Halloween or before Halloween?
After. Right after.
Halloween was part of how he got the clout to make this.
Got it. Okay.
Steven, what is your favorite scene of Tango and Cash, though, before we go on?
I have one more admission to make. I've never seen Tango.
Oh my! Shot through the heart.
Wow.
You're to blame.
Cue the on joke.
Strike two.
Hey, Steven, are you aware that there's an invention called movies?
I am. It's just, whatever this little thing here is just not my expertise. But
wow,
the Thing is a monster film. Yes, am I wrong there, or what? How set it up here for me.
It is
drama.
It is psychological horror, monster movie. As Wes said, it's a paranoia movie. It's science fiction. It's a lot of different things in one package.
There is a level of body horror involved, but it is one of the classier horror movies. Like, it's something like I know you really well. It's a movie that you would really appreciate.
I'm an enormous Kurt Russell fan, and I do like John Carpenter.
And you like this, Steven. It's a remake, quote unquote, of a Howard Hawks movie based on a short story.
Oh wow! Okay.
But I know you'd respond to that.
Yeah, that's cool.
That seems like your your New York sensibility.
The short story is
so pretentious.
Who goes there? But this movie doesn't resemble a lot of the Howard Hawks movie. He kind of went back to the short story and kind of took it from there.
He did. Yeah, the Howard Hawks movie, they didn't have the ability to do the shapeshifting.
Yeah.
So they just stripped all of that out of it. So it just becomes a bunch of scientists. Yeah, it's a carrot. It's a bunch of scientists in a freezing cold place, and they dig up an alien, and the alien starts killing them. That's what it is. So you lose the paranoia of it could be any of us. It's reading our minds. It knows what we're planning. Like, you lose all of that. They sort of hand wave it away at one point, like maybe it's reading our minds, and that's like the only line that they ever say about that. Whereas Carpenter, like you said, went back to the original Who Goes There story and brought in the maybe it can read our minds and emulate us perfectly, and it's turning into us, and how would we ever know which of us is this monster? Which is the best part of it. So I'm glad he went back to the original story.
John Carpenter worshipped Howard Hawks. It was his favorite director of all time, and Assault on Precinct 13 is Rio Bravo. Basically, he remade Rio Bravo. But it's kind of fun to have Steven on here because then because there might be some listeners that never seen the movies. We can kind of describe like the opening or whatever. Breck, describe from your director perspective, what give us the setup of the movie.
We are in a desolate Arctic tundra, a helicopter. And now I haven't seen the movie in a couple of years, but I obviously remember the opening. The helicopter is chasing a dog across the tundra, approaching a U.S. base. And I think they're Norwegian. They are Norwegian. And there's a guy hanging out the side with a rifle shooting at this, what seems to be innocent dog. The helicopter blows up, right? They shoot the guy who's trying to shoot the dog, and they say rescue the dog, thinking they've done good. And the audience thinks that they've, kind of saved this dog, but also knows it can't be good.
And the guy is the worst marksman in the world's history.
Yeah.
I mean, he takes like 15 shots. So it starts off, this helicopter's bombing through the Antarctic snow, and this dog's like hauling ass, and this guy's just shooting, with a scope, lining up and just missing and missing,
constantly missing.
Just like A-Team style, just like the side of the barn, just missing.
And this dog, and they make it all the way to the U.S. base. But I will say, if there was one misstep of the movie, and I know that it was of the time, but if we're looking at it now, I don't think, because it really started with the flying saucer coming to the Earth, and I don't think it needed that. I actually
was that in the movie?
No,
I don't even remember that. It started with that.
Yeah, that's
Holy
the thing.
shit.
Is like you see a saucer coming to Earth, and it's like crash landing, but like old school.
I
saucer,
blanked that out of my mind. That's funny.
Yeah, and it comes to Earth and it crashes, and several 100,000 years ago, but it crashes. And then cut to the helicopters coming, and I was like, man, what a strong start. You're starting in the action. You're starting with everything going.
That's funny.
You don't need the saucer. And it feels like a studio note, honestly.
That's funny.
You know what that reminds me of? I think it is a studio note, because what it reminds me of is the opening to Predator.
Right.
Where instead of starting with the jungle team getting ready to go in and rescue the hostages, they start with that stupid spaceship flying down to Earth scene. And that one I know for a fact was a studio note, that the studio was worried that audiences wouldn't know this was a science fiction movie. So they tacked on this terrible opening of a spaceship flying down to Earth, and then we cut to the team being put together to go on this rescue mission. It's such a stronger movie if you just start with the team showing up to go on this rescue mission, and then what's happening in the jungle is mysterious. You're like, what the fuck? What is happening here? Instead, we go, oh, it's the alien because we just saw its spaceship land, right?
Yeah. How much more effective would this movie have been if you don't have the flying saucer? And, you know, in terms of like a great way to start a movie, so you start in the action. This guy, and there's mystery, right? Where's this guy from? He's Norwegian. Why is he shooting this thing? And he goes through camp. He just ignores. So he goes through camp. He ignores. Everybody runs up like, what the fuck is he doing? He just walks right through them and is shooting at this dog. And what I love is how you introduce the characters through their action and how they respond to this guy shooting. So there's no exposition. You start to get a sense of who people are by how they're responding to what's happening with this guy coming to shoot.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I think George is a pretty fucking good sport because he takes one in the thigh, and they come over, they're like, are you okay? He goes, yeah, I'm fine. Don't worry. He's like, took a shot to the thigh, and he's like, yeah, we're fine. What's going on? Let's figure this shit out. Totally like just rocked it off. I was like, George is a good fucking sport getting shot. And then we get to see old Walter Brimley, sans mustache. Now, a buddy of mine, my friend Jamie Linden, he has this thing. It's called the Brimley, right? Who's your Brimley? So basically, he hates Brimley, right? And you know, because of that TV show he had in the 80s, like he's like everybody's grandpa, like everybody loves him. So we always say, like, who is the person that everybody loves that you hate, and that person is your Brimley. Does that make sense? So like people, like, to give an example, I'm not saying this is my Brimley, but like a Joseph Gordon-Levitt, right? If you don't like Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and you know, he's kind of, everybody adores him, everybody loves him, that's his Brimley.
Can my Brimley be a song?
Why do you hate Joseph Gordon-Levitt?
Yeah, your Brimley can be a song, it could be anything.
Don't
like
worry, be happy
loves.
is my Brimley.
No,
fucking hate that song.
A lot of people hate that song.
I hate that song.
That doesn't qualify to your Brimley. What's your Brimley, Ty? Ty, everybody
is Ty's Brimley.
The human race.
Hates everyone.
He has a doctrine of blanket hate.
I don't have a doctrine of blanket hate, but I do have many things that I hate that other people seem to love.
Carpenter is really good at the comedic setups, and one of the great setups in this that echoes throughout the film is J.R. McCready thinks that they're Swedes. He keeps calling them Swedes, and everybody's like, Norwegians. You know, so like how the thing goes, goddamn Swede! It's like, it's Norwegians. And then they go to the camp or whatever. And then, you know, somebody, like, when they're like, what the fuck happened? This guy comes in and he's fucking shooting. What's going on? And they're like, maybe we're at war with Norway. It's like, no, that's probably not what it is. So then they go and check out the other camp. Why the fuck would they found this lump of human mess? Why would they bring that back?
Why bring it back? Yeah, you don't bring that back.
Well, they need to do scientific experiments on it.
Well, you know, they covered themselves by one of the guys saying we're gonna win the Nobel Prize for this or whatever prize. But why would you bring that back? And that
because it's a horror movie.
It's a camp full of scientists, and they found something scientifically interesting, and they're in fucking Antarctica. There's nothing else to look at.
That's
Fair
a good
point.
Like,
Fair point.
That's a good call. But Ty, I do think this horror movie lives up to your horror movie standard, where everybody acts smart in the movie. Yeah. Like, you know, people do things that are logical. So Ty's theory on horror movies is like, if people do things that are logical, that make sense, things that you would do, and they're still fucked or they're still confronted with an evil that like outsmarts them, then it's way more effective and way scarier. Whereas if people act like idiots and do stupid things, then it doesn't scare him, or it's not as an effective a movie.
I agree.
Yeah, because if you watch the action happen and you're sitting there thinking, no one would do that, that's the stupidest thing a person could do in that situation, and then that person dies, you have no sympathy for them, you're not empathizing, you're not putting yourself in their shoes, so it's not scary. If you're watching the person going, God, this is such a good idea, this is what I do, I hope it works, I hope they get away, and then because of circumstances they can't control, it doesn't work and they don't get away, then you're empathizing. You're in there with them. You're like, oh my God, I would have done that too. I would have gotten murdered by the thing because I would have done the exact same thing they just did. That's much scarier.
It also does a great job of place. You know, it's like all you have to do. They have to be smart about it, but they also have to be trapped in a way that's believable. And there are like so few places. That's why Alien worked. That's why when you read Dracula, the Demeter, that section is so terrifying when you read the journal about that. And it's why like the Abyss could work. You know, underwater. They're so like they have to be acting in that way, but they also have to be truly isolated and truly trapped. I think it's that combination. There's so few places in the world where it existed in present day that work for that idea. I think that's one of the other reasons that made it so successful.
And the classic haunted house story does require that you are trapped in the house.
Yeah.
And every story you mentioned, Breck, is a haunted house.
Sure.
And you have to be trapped in the house. And that's a tricky thing to do. And a lot of haunted house stories that fail, it's because the reasons the person is trapped in the house are very contrived.
Sure.
Or because the person is stupid or they make bad decisions. They have to be trapped in the house, and they have to be trapped in the house in a way that we sympathize with because it's beyond their control.
And what's also interesting is sometimes for those
Antarctica.
You're trapped. But what's nice about this movie that I loved is it could be present day. It's so hard to get trapped present day. Either you're out in the future in space, or you're in a house in the moors of England and it's in the past. But to create a present day story that gets you truly isolated and trapped, I think is really relatable and makes you feel like you're there with them.
That's why the ones that work in modern day tend to be supernatural.
Sure.
Because when you add a supernatural element, then you can kind of forgive everything. Like, our phones don't work, so we can't call for help. Well, that's because supernatural things are stopping that from working. Then that's okay.
What are some of the horror movies you like? You were fans of?
Actually, I liked Halloween.
Yeah,
that's John Carpenter. Halloween's an excellent shining. So the thing in and of itself is an alien, or it's a virus, or it's what exactly?
So what the thing is, and this to me, this type of monster, because I'm a fan of ghost stories too, and this type of monster, it feels ghost to me. And Breck, you were talking about Alien. So for Alien, I would say is probably higher on my list than this movie, but the monster in this movie is probably the highest fear factor for me. Number one, I have a bit of OCD. Number two, the thing that you can't detect, when the alien's coming out of the wall, that alien's there, it's going to be futile, but you can try to fight it in whatever way you can. This thing, you can't, it outsmarts you, can't figure. So basically it's an alien that exists on a cellular level.
Oh. Okay.
So what it does is it'll infect you and occupy your cells and then mimic you and create another you. But it can take, it's kind of like a lot of the protomolecule, like how it can take, it's a lot of it can absorb consciousness and form, and then also it can riff on it, right? So it can be an in between a dog and a man, it has all these kind of ways of doing it. And so they're trapped in this encampment, and this thing is taken over, but you don't fucking know because you, Steven, could be the thing.
Oh, that's really clever.
Yeah, and so it's really smart terrifying. Because they have to come up with all these. They have to come up with all these ways, and there's this famous scene, the blood testing scene, that to me is a master scene, because every single time the jump works for me. Every single time, as it evolves, it starts to descend into madness, right? Because then it's you feel like, okay, now we got a little bit of control. Everybody's, not to give it too much away, but everybody's tied up. We created this system of how we can test the blood. We have this blowtorch because we know that it is the most effective thing we have at this point to kill the thing. And we can figure out who the creature is. And everybody's lined up, tied up. I mean, in terms of construction of a scene, it's just brilliant. And so Kurt Russell's character, J.R. McCready, takes a wire, and what he figured out is that on a cellular level, so basically they can come together and create work its survival. So it's all it is an alien ship that crashed in the Antarctic frozen tundra, and it's just trying to survive.
It's a parasite.
It's a parasite, and it's trying to survive, and it's trying to get to civilization so then it can just morph and take everything. And what Kurt Russell's character figures out is that even on a cellular, each individual cell is trying to survive. So he heats up this wire, and if he puts it in a piece thing in blood, if the heat just goes out, then you're not the thing. But if he puts it in there and it fucking reacts, then he knows that you were the creature. So it goes through and takes everybody's blood. Everybody's fucking tied up. You don't know who the thing is. You don't know what's going on. And the thing is smart because when it invades somebody, they are manipulating. They're manipulating. They're fucking with each other to do different things. So he's going through and he's doing the thing. And then in your mind, he's testing everybody's blood. In your mind, you're like, is this thing even going to work? It's not tested. Is this thing going to do it? And then he goes to the guy that they lead you to suspect. And the guy's like, this is bullshit. This isn't going to work. So now your attention's drawn. He's like, so each one has its own tension. He goes through 3, right? Its own tension. Then he takes one and this guy's like, this is fucking bullshit. And you're thinking he's the guy, right? And he's like, this is bullshit. He's like, as he's talking, and he puts it, and it fucking, and the blood like fucking reacts and starts running. You're like, ah! And then it's like this crazy scene where the guy's like, the guy there now knows he's exposed, so he starts to change. And you know what's crazy is that I thought that the I don't know my batteries.
What is he doing to you, Steven?
I mean, you know,
This is a sudden change in scene.
Yeah, what's happening down there?
Wow, that was unexpected.
Woo! So, but what's interesting is that that
was fast, by the way, Steven. Well done.
He's been locked up. It's been COVID.
Yeah, man.
It's still COVID in New York. I don't know if you know that. So, but the visual effects and the special effects, because I went from when I remember seeing it as a kid, totally bought it, hook, line, and sinker, totally moved me. Then as I got older, I watched it again. I was like, I don't know if the visual effects hold up. Watching it again, I'm like, oh my God, they hold up remarkably well, which is, I don't remember them holding up as well.
Did you guys see it in the theater as kids?
Yeah, I saw it in the theater. And I have a funny story about what happened after I saw it.
So do I, by the way.
The practical effects tend to hold up better because it's a real thing, right? It's like a tangible, real thing that was in the space with the actors. Whereas when CGI goes out of date, when CGI gets old, then it just looks like a bad.
But most
CGI
of those effects
shot.
were not in the room
Right.
with the actors in this case. They are practical effects, but most of them were post effects added. There were some puppets, but I agree with your assessment on that because they're physical.
But yeah, I mean they were using
a little
puppetry
bit as
to move these things
representative.
around. Yeah.
But you're right. But I agree. Like because with visual effects, the physical characteristics and the finishes evolve, and we pass by them. And when we think effects are like these finishes looked real in the '90s, and now we look at it looks like just garbage from digital effects. But done physical effects, whether it's like Star Wars back in the day, those hold up. But I can't, but from the '90s, some of the digital work of the Star Wars lexicon doesn't hold up.
What's fantastic, like a great scene construction, and really John Carpenter at his height of directing, is the scene where the dog goes in the kennel. And I don't know how they got these performances out of the dog, but when we see the monster for the first time, dog enters the kennel, right? Now, but he did such a good job of creating mystery around that dog because there's certain times the camera would pan to the dog. There was a dog when he walked in the storage room where there's like this random shadow of a person. You remember that?
Yeah.
When he walks in the storage room, and there's like whole chat boards on the internet of who that guy was, which I have my own theories. When the dog enters the kennel and he shuts the door, the dog kind of waits for the guy to leave. The guy leaves. All the dogs that are there ahead of time are kind of laying around. They're sleeping. They're laying around. They slowly kind of wake up. They see there's a new dog there. And that dog, when the guy leaves, he looks around. And then the other dogs start to sense something's off with this dog. And so they slowly, it's like a slow growl. And then that dog, because it's all meek and like going up and it's licking them and everything to get him to save. And then that dog, when that guy's gone and they start, then it's like, and the fucking and the fucking mouth open, and all that shit starts happening. You're like, holy shit! And then the guy that loves the dog, he comes running back in, and the thing is already infiltrating the other dogs. He's spreading its seed,
Yep.
like we did in Spring Break. He's spreading his seed just all over the place and just fucking infecting these dogs. And that whole metamorphosis into the monster when you first see it, it's so well done. And what really gets me every time is when you start to see all this monster shit, and then you start to see these human eyes come out of the muck and open. That scares the shit out of me. And that was masterfully done.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Yeah. The interesting thing about all these transformations is some of the lore behind the thing is that the creature can only turn into stuff that it has previously absorbed, right? And so when you see these, like when the head turns into a spider, that kind of stuff, you're getting to see other civilizations that this alien has interacted with in the past. Like its toolkit is species that have been killed by it.
Yeah, that's great.
They don't go into that in detail in the movie, but I love the lore of that. That like its toolkit is like, I need a spider thing. Oh yeah, I killed a bunch of spiders on this other alien planet 1 million years ago, so I could turn my head into a spider thing. Like I just love that idea that it has this toolkit of murdered species in its bag.
It wasn't a commercial hit, but was it? How was it received? Was it like a?
It's funny. It was not well received at all.
Oh, interesting.
I don't remember that though. To me, the great experiences of movies are not just the movies themselves, but the way you experience, the way you're introduced to a movie, and like especially as a kid, like how you saw it. So sometimes these movies that were short-lived, you might have missed in the theater. I, like Ty, remember clearly watching this movie. Like I know the theater I was at. It was the Plitt Theater at ABC Center in Los Angeles in Century City, where CAA is now. I remember which theater it was in. I was there with my dad and my really good friend at the time from New York, a guy named Jack Angelo, and he is a New York, like you, is a New Yorker who hates LA. And every time he'd come to LA, something terrible would happen to him. Like we'd taken to Magic Mountain once, he got a terrible earache, and which we all thought was hilarious as he was rolling around in the back of the car. So we go to, he just gets to LA, and my dad, there's a screening for it. I think it's like an early screening for it at the ABC Center. So the three of us go, and it's a packed house, which was rare for this movie because it was not a hit. And the Platt Theater or Plitt Theater, whatever, it was a massive space. So thousands of people in this gigantic theater, fucking freaking out. The way Wes experienced, imagine 1,000 people, 5,000 people having that reaction to the moment with the blood, and it marked in my brain this moment of the greatest experience of going to a horror movie and what a horror movie could be, and so much so. And it wasn't the monster I was afraid of. I was afraid of what Wes was talking about. Was like, this is a story about 5 people, I think it's, that need to work together to keep each other alive. They're in the most dangerous of place. They need each other. They have to trust each other. So these are the people you trust, and suddenly these people, you don't know who you can trust. Suddenly these people whose lives you're dependent on each other surviving, a monster's living in one or some of them or all of them, and that fucking freaked me out. So after the movie, I was absolutely terrified. After the movie, we went back, and Jack was sleeping over. I was 12 or 11, and I remember waking up in the middle of the movie. I remember my nightmare from the movie was that my parents had turned into aliens. I was so scared of it that I actually remember the nightmare. I went into my parents' room, and I said, I can't sleep, and I'm going to sleep here. And my mom said, are you sure it's a good idea? Your friend Jack is in his room. I'm like, I can't sleep. I have to. Jack woke up in the middle of the night, fucking terrified, couldn't find me in this house he didn't know, wandering in the house, opened my parents' door, saw me asleep, and I was like, oh, fuck. To this day, he still makes fun of me for that moment. So, still, literally a couple days ago, he made fun of me. So this movie has sat in my head. And so when I was doing a movie here called The Crazies, I was making a horror movie, I said, to me, the scariest movie ever told was The Thing. I like Alien better, but I think The Thing is scarier
I
for
agree.
exactly what Wes was talking about. I said, the crazies will work if they're not zombies. If like the people they trust the most, let's make it the principal. Let's make it the guy's husband who kills the son. Like if we make the people you trust most, the ones who betray you, that's fucking scary. And how can we create that in a zombie type movie? And so that from that experience of being 12 has really lived with me for good and bad for my life. And that's why I'm so connected to this movie.
And it kills me to say it. You know this kills me to say it. But The Crazies is actually a good horror movie for that
Thank
reason.
you.
It's a good horror movie. It has that element of you don't know where the attack is coming from. You don't know who to trust and who not to trust. And it works really well. So, I mean, it kills me to say it, but that's a really good horror movie you made.
Coming from you, I know that's high praise. Thank you.
But going in, so I remember being at my dad's house, and I was at his house. It was summertime. I was visiting my dad, and it was like, it was late at night. It was on HBO, and this movie came on, and my dad was like, "Oh, I love this," because he knew I love Kurt. He goes, he knew I love Kurt Russell. He's like, "Oh, you're gonna fucking love this," and I stayed up and watched this movie, and I was like enthralled. And there's something about like Alien, that working class, day to day, mundane activity between these guys that just kind of lulls you to sleep. Just kind of, it's kind of meditative. It's kind of comforting. And then when shit goes wrong and they're isolated in this place, like Ty was talking about, it's the haunted house. But going into the second act, like after Brimley really dissects the body and understands what it's doing and kind of explains it to them, and then that's when the paranoia begins. That's when the movie really kind of starts taking off. And what's interesting is Carpenter says, there are times when I go back and I think about starting the movie from that point, starting the movie from these guys finding this weird lump of biotissue and really figuring out that there's this insidious alien being that lives within inside it, and it could be anybody. Because I think, if you start at that point with the paranoia and everything, I don't know. I like the start that it has now, minus the flying saucer.
Yeah.
But it is when the movie starts getting like absolutely terrifying, especially when Brimley loses his mind. So Brimley is the guy. So Brimley is the doctor who starts researching the body, and his hypothesis is, okay, this is an alien thing because that is infecting the body. It's mimicking these things, and we don't know who is what or whatever. So he goes on the computer and he starts putting in like all these. And by the way, Carpenter talks about at the time they were like, this technology doesn't exist. Do you remember like the asteroid graphics of it'll have a cell and then the red thing infecting that cell and then morphing and morphing and morphing, and then it gives the graphics of like if it got released in the population, how long will it take over Europe? How long will it take over the world? How long is this thing? So it makes Brimley go insane. Walter Brimley go insane, and he takes out his old 38 special and he takes it out of the drawer, and then he goes and he disables the helicopter and he starts tearing up all the computers and shit like that so they can't communicate with the outside, which makes perfect sense because he's like, we're all fucked. I don't know who's infected. I don't know if I'm infected and what's going on, and we're not gonna go anywhere. So they're to their horror, they're like, you're tearing up our lifelines, and they're trying to stop him. And he's just fucking blazing. I mean, he's shooting from the hip. He has no hesitation. He's killing them and fucking tearing up these things. But what's interesting and what people are, what people have whole threads on Reddit or whatever talk about the thing is like, when did Brimley get infected? And if you're infected, if you're not, if you're infected, do you know you're infected? Does it mimic you so well that you don't know that you're infected? Because the best way of survival is believing that you're not one of the infected. And I think that's a really interesting to think about. And I think about it a lot.
Yeah.
And also you go back and there's all kinds of theories about when people got infected and when they weren't infected. And it's really interesting because like they never reveal who destroyed all the blood. You remember when somebody came in and destroyed the blood in the cabinet? They never reveal that. And there's all these theories about who destroyed it and who was infected at the time and everything. And that I think is a good movie because I endlessly think about it. If there was something that took you over, how could you trust yourself? You know, like that's the scary thing is like, you know, even McCready, when he found his outfit that was like, you know, damaged, he found his outfit that was damaged and he's like, you know, and everybody was like, fuck. They left him out in a blizzard for him to freeze to death and die because they thought he was infected. And then he breaks in. You remember he has the dynamite and the flare and he's like, back off. And he's almost frozen.
Frozen beard.
But frozen beard. But even him, he doesn't know if he's infected. You know, you see the fear in his eyes, and he's like, "Fuck, am I one of those?" And that's when he comes up with the blood test, and that's why. So the tension is so loaded when it comes to that blood test because the thought process that he goes through of like, here's the thing: if we were all infected, then there would be no need. Like we would all be dead, right? That we would all be whatever this thing is. Like there would be no need for the charade, right? So there's more of us that's not affected than is affected. So if that is the case, we need to figure out who's infected and we got to separate them. And it's such a great premise and such a beginning to that scene.
It's also something that was really great about the film that you often get the studio note, what are the world's stakes? You know, it's kind of like an 80s, 90s note. And they'd kind of impress on every movie, how does this have a bigger impact than just the people that are in the story? And it often was a fake way to deal with the kind of a bigger storytelling. But I liked how this was you were rooting for the survival of these people, but you were also rooting for them to not survive and not get away, you know, like, and so, because I liked that there was real world, like the bigger stakes and the tracking of how this would take over the world. It was, you didn't need it, but it made it better. And
I think it made it 100% better, and it justified Brimley's action.
Sure.
Right? Because you weren't like, what the fuck you doing, dude? And then Brimley's like, one of his greatest performances, because you remember when they come in there and they're questioning him and he's like, guys, I'm sorry, can I come back in now? And there's a noose just randomly hanging in his thing, and you're like, what the fuck is the noose there?
Yeah.
And what's going on? And he's so like deadpan, and he's like, guys, I'm sorry, I can I come back in? I want to come back. Can I come back in? And it was like a thing. So he's saying this, and as he's saying it, there's a noose just hanging in the background, and you're like, who the fuck tied the noose? And was he gonna kill himself? And like, what's going to happen? And like, what is this? And then when they end up breaking into Brimley's place, there's that tunnel that goes underground, and he's creating the new thing with the helicopter, and you're like, holy shit, it's all manipulation.
Yeah.
He was manipulating them, and if they can manipulate on that level, even tying a fucking noose in the ceiling, that like to get sympathy of like, oh shit, he might kill himself. And that isn't obviously, if the monster was going to tie a noose in the ceiling, that's not going to lead to his survival. He's not going to kill himself. Right. So then it's like that level of manipulation. That's what's so scary about this movie.
The device of it being anybody is like the cascading effect. Because just listening to the story, I totally get how paranoid, like, everyone must have been feeling in that theater at the time. I mean, like, but it's really interesting how that paranoia works on so many different levels of not just who it is, but also not being able to trust yourself, of not really wanting to get out, but also, you know, the audience not really wanting them to get out either because they don't try. Like, it's really interesting.
So on that note, let me tell you my story. So I was a kid. I go see The Thing. My parents were wacko religious people, so of course we weren't allowed to see stuff like that. So
Ty was in a sex cult.
A couple of my buddies.
I didn't know that. Oh.
I was in a sex cult. A couple of my buddies come over and they're going to, like, you know, stay the night at my house, right? My friend Ed and my friend Rondi. And so Ed and I are very similar in like sort of temperament, but Rondi was jumpy. He was a jumpy guy. He was easily freaked out, right? So the three of us go to the theater. We watch The Thing. But you know, like telling our parents we're going to go see some like G-rated bullshit, and then we go see this thing instead. We're coming back. Rondi is clearly on edge. Like, this movie has freaked him the fuck out, right? And so Ed and I just keep making fun of it, like, oh, look out, man, the thing's gonna get you, you know, that kind of bullshit. And Rondi is like seriously on edge. So we get back to my house. I had a fairly high up off the ground bed, and the two of them are in like sleeping bags on the floor, right, on either side of that bed. And everybody's talking about the movie. Everybody, like, the lights are out. We're not sleeping. We're just talking about the movie. And this was in the 80s, so this is the era of skinny ties. And laying laying off the side of my bed was a skinny purple tie that I had. And while we're talking, I just rolled it up into a roll, right? And then as I'm talking, I just start choking. I'm like, and Rodney goes, "Are you okay?" And I leaned over and I held the tie up my mouth and let it unroll and fall on him. He completely lost his shit and started screaming. And my parents came in. They were like, "What's going on in here?" Right? And he wouldn't shut up. He wouldn't stop. Like, I was sure we were busted because he was going to start talking about the thing, and then we're all busted, right? Because we weren't supposed to be seeing the thing. He managed to eventually calm himself down to where he's like, "Oh, I just had a nightmare and it freaked me out." But yeah, for a minute there, I thought we were fucked. But later, talking to Ed, he agreed it was one of the greatest practical jokes ever played on somebody.
I can empathize with Rondi.
You know, this movie has an underrated moment. There's a moment in this movie that's on par with the chest, in my opinion, with the chest bursting scene in Alien. It's not as impactful as that, but you know, when the guy was dying and they were trying to charge his heart, and he went down and he fell to the
CPR scene.
Yeah, the CPR.
Fucking like the
CPR scene. Yeah.
Like, I mean, that was so surprising and so insane. I mean, you know, it's up there with the chest bursting scene, and I can't figure out why. I mean, I guess it would be interesting to go back and maybe Joseph came while we're talking, like the top movies of 1982. But this has everything This has everything I want in a horror movie. It's smart. The monster or villain or whatever it is really scary and insidious, and you can't put your hand on it. You also care about the people. You know the characters. And, you know, one of the things I think every writer can really get from when they watch this is McCready is a fascinating character. I know now by reading about it, but he was a, ex-Vietnam helicopter pilot who's seen some shit that he's like is having a hard time dealing with. So he volunteers to be for the job to fly these scientists up to study in Antarctica because he's just trying to get away from all the madness and the voices, and he's an alcoholic, and he's drinking. Remember, he's playing chess in the beginning, and he pours the alcohol on the chessboard, and he's like, "You cheating bitch," or whatever. And I look at that, and I'm like, I got all of that from nobody saying a word. Like a bad movie would have been like, "Man, this is like Nam when I saw my friends get slaughtered, and I don't know who to trust." But what they did is they create within his performance, they created a character who's already barely hanging on, who's obviously is drinking to bury something, and now he's in a situation with a level of paranoia and a level of not knowing who to trust, where he just left. This is 82, right? So he just left it, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It was great. Joseph, do we have a top 5?
No, we don't do a top 5 for these.
Can't afford it.
Okay. All right, we got 10 minutes to come up with top 5 Kurt Russell characters, and this will be locked in stone.
Kurt Russell.
Should we do top 5
characters?
Top 5 characters, top 5 performances, or top 5 Kurt Russell movies? What's more interesting?
Well,
I like the characters idea because the movies that he has the best characters aren't necessarily
top 5
his
characters.
best movies.
Snake is number 1.
But
number 1.
Snake Plissken, obviously, like Breck said, Snake is. I would also say
Jack
Big
Burton.
Trouble in Little China. That is Jack Burton.
Yeah.
Maybe one of the greatest cinema characters of all time. And what I love about Jack, and the way it plays out in that movie is that Jack is the ultimate fake hero. He's the guy who thinks he's the hero of the movie and isn't.
Jack Burton's point of view and who he thinks he is where most of the humor comes from in that movie. Yeah, and that's genius.
Yes.
And that's genius.
100%.
So,
that's
and what's interesting is Snake Plissken. He's open about it. Snake Plissken. He was imitating, he was imitating Clint Eastwood, and Jack Burton. He was imitating John Wayne.
Yep.
I mean, if we had more time, I could argue Jack Burton being number 1, but Snake. It's hard for Snake Plissken. Yeah. But I think McCready. Well, no, I would have to. Yeah, Wyatt Earp maybe. Yeah,
I love McCready.
So Wyatt Earp and Tombstone.
Yeah, he was amazing.
I love McCready. This is a good character, McCready.
But I honestly think probably his best performance as an actor that's being effective in a character that's serving the story, I think is McCready.
Yeah.
I think he is very effective. He's very good. And I think it's one of his most nuanced and subtle performances in a movie. But Snake Plissken is iconic. Jack Burton's iconic. So McCready is probably 3 just based on the performance and this everything. And so we got Snake Plissken, Jack Burton, McCready, Wyatt Earp, I think is a good 4. You guys on that one for Tombstone?
Yeah. And what's amazing about Wyatt Earp as number 4 in Tombstone is that's not even the character people remember from that movie.
Right.
That movie was so stacked with great actors and great characters that an amazing performance like he gives in that movie with Wyatt Earp, the one we always remember is Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday.
Now, I think one of his greatest performances of all time, his John Carpenter debut, is when 1978 when he played Elvis Presley in the John Carpenter TV movie.
Oh, I don't.
I've never seen that either.
I think he will blow your fucking mind. He did, it was the first movie out of his Disney era. And he was very hungry because he left Disney, went into baseball. And after baseball, when he had that injury, shoulder injury, then he went back to movies and he had a hard time. I mean, he what's interesting about Kurt is forgetting about his struggle to be taken seriously because he was a Disney guy for so many years and kind of what he did. But John Carpenter hired him when nobody else would. And John Carpenter was doing his first big, we say that The Thing is John Carpenter's first studio movie, but his first big, like, mainstream movie was he did an Elvis movie, but it was a TV movie. And he hired Kurt when nobody else would. And the reason Kurt has worked with him over and over again is out of loyalty because, John Carpenter gave him his first, character study of Elvis, but also gave him his first action role in Snake Plissken. But Elvis, my dad used to think he was Elvis. So we used to watch all the Elvis movies over and over and over. And Kurt Russell's one of the best Elvises
maybe his best
there.
role and his worst role, he both played Elvis. Elvis, and then 3,000 miles to Graceland, the Elvis impersonator. You get the best and the worst in the,
oh my
in
God.
one.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, it hurts me that you even brought that up.
How about Big Trouble in Little China? I don't remember the character name. That was a good one.
Jack Burton.
Oh, that's Burton.
He's number 2.
Well, that's Jack Burton.
His name was Jack Burton. That's a boring name.
He was.
I don't remember the name of the character.
I'm gonna agree with Steven over there. I think his character in Hateful Eight is a fantastic character.
Yeah,
and I think he does a fantastic job.
So we have Snake Plissken, Jack Burton, McCready, Wyatt Earp. So in the 5th spot, we have to vote because Steven and Ty think that in the Hateful Eight that should be the 5th spot. I think Elvis, but Elvis is disqualified if you haven't seen it. Everybody in the group has to see it. Well, then if nobody's seen Elvis, I don't know. Stuntman Mike was really in the Tarantino movies.
Yeah, he was great in that.
Stuntman Mike is a pretty great character. And again, it's not just how great the character is; it's how well he does that character. And I thought he really nailed what Stuntman Mike was in his performance. So, I mean, I could go with that one too. I mean, it's a great part, and he does really well.
Who's John Ruth?
Toss up. I think John
Ruth
is Hateful Eight.
John Ruth is the Hateful Eight character.
What about Tequila Sunrise? I fucking love that movie. I thought don't say no.
Steven
Breck,
that's Steven's favorite movie. How many times have you seen that, Steven? Come on,
dude. Mel Gibson.
Have you seen
Mel Gibson? And,
Cocktail or that? Which do you prefer?
Don't make me choose, Breck.
Mel Gibson and Kurt Russell were at the height of their handsomeness in that movie.
That's never a good that's never a good selling point.
I'm gonna take Stuntman Mike.
Hey, Steven, what was Kurt Russell's character's name in the movie you did with him?
Commander. Yeah.
The Commander.
I was
Commander.
actually
That's right. Okay,
that's
the Commander.
Disney Return. That was my first movie. It was with Kurt Russell. He was amazing.
Give us a Kurt Russell story.
Just the down to earth. I couldn't have imagined watching a better lead coming onto a set as a young actor, and just watching someone so gracious and set the tone.
That's how you describe working with me. What a coincidence! I'm gonna go Stuntman Mike because I had a good time with that role.
I'm actually going to say John.
I have John Ruth too.
Oh,
I'm kind of John Ruth.
Oh, that's true.
I would also go John Ruth.
Oh, voted out. All right, Snake Plissken, Jack Burton, McCready, Wyatt Earp, and John Ruth. That's our top 5.
And by the way, if just those things were your career, it'd be a fucking amazing career.
If just Snake was your career, fuck.
Yeah. I mean, look at the 5 parts that are just like a tiny piece of his portfolio, and look how amazing those 5 things are. I would say the only question we have left to answer now, before we wrap this up, is Steven, have we convinced you to watch The Thing?
Oh
yeah, great.
It sounds amazing. Yeah. I'll totally see it. I really had no idea.
There you go. Then our mission was
about.
successful.
I will absolutely.
What's great is the staying. Look, a movie's great when the staying power of The Thing is always in conversation as one of the greatest horror movies ever made, and that's when a movie's great. And those great movies don't always get noticed right away, but they have that staying power.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you guys for hanging out. Good time. I know Breck's got to go, but appreciate it.
Yeah, but before Breck leaves, he needs to comment, like, and subscribe to the channel, and also to look at possibly subscribing to our Patreon.
Just did it. There we go.
So Breck, make sure you do all those things.
And when you do, Breck, you get an autographed T-shirt and underwear from Ty Franck.
Yes.
And those underwear
are they used underwear? Good. All right. I'm very excited for that. I'll add it to my collection that I already have.
They're vintage. You're going to love them.
Nice.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. Well,